Agree. I think
Yeah, because I went back
Yes, sir.
again and looked like it was the same.
He probably lost his passport.
he did. Kevin did that.
Tourism hire.
Where's Charlie?
Positive as well. That I think.
Oh, he's not out of the country yet. When's he going out of the country?
It's not.
Oh, okay. Kevin did it when he was abroad.
Yeah.
And he was coming home. He was traveling like 2 days.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It is the appointed hour of 7 o'clock. Welcome to the Lexington City Council regular meeting of November 16, 2023. And invite anyone that wishes to speak during citizens' comments this evening to be sure to sign up. And with that, I will call us to order. If you all will please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you all very much. And thank you for braving the elements and the smoke. I hope that that'll blow out of here soon and the fire will diminish rapidly. Covered lots of acreage so far. With the consideration of the agenda, would like to add a closed session for council. And under new business, it indicates consideration, but I would suggest that those are for information purposes. We'll update and then revisit those at a future meeting. And are there any other adjustments or items, Ms. Strawn?
Could we add after the closed meeting, in case we need it, a discussion on process for the city manager search, that we may not have that discussion depending how the closed session goes?
Sounds good.
You see what I'm saying?
I think so. When we come out of closed session, you'd like to have an item of discussing the process for how we move forward with our city manager search,
If we need it.
if we need it.
Yeah.
Okay,
Does that make sense?
kinda.
Yeah. I hate to come out and not notify people we might have a discussion on that. I'd rather say it now.
Sure.
And then we may not end up having that discussion.
Very good. Jeannie, you have that added?
You need to stay.
That's a good question. Does council expect staff to stay?
No.
Okay. Very good. With those adjustments or the addition of a possible discussion on city manager hiring process, closed session, and no action on new business, Unless there are any objections, we'll adopt the agenda as with those adjustments. It is approved. Next presentation, I'd like to invite Julie Goyette to come and share with us an update from the Rockbridge Regional Library. Julie, welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to talk about the library this evening. I will provide an overview of the library and share information about how we operate and some data from FY 2023. Before I do that, there's a handout on the last page. There's an all capital word, all capital letters word on that last page. That was meant for me, not for you. So I apologize. So most of you may know our history. Some of you may not. Our library system was originally set up by the Lexington Junior Women's Club on a bookshelf in a room above Grossman's, which later became McCrum's on Main Street in Lexington in 1934. 12 years later, the library became the Botetourt Rockbridge Regional Library, serving the two counties in Lexington with a bookmobile and allocations from Botetourt and Rockbridge counties and what was then the town of Lexington. Since 1988, the past 35 years, we have been Rockbridge Regional Library System with locations in Lexington, Warm Springs, Glasgow, Goshen, and Buena Vista. In addition to our physical locations, there are 3 outreach vehicles: the bookmobile for community stops across our region. Can you hear me okay? And 2 smaller vehicles used to reach our homebound, disabled, senior patrons, as well as preschools and deposit stations. Deposit stations are usually in a central location like a post office, and it allows patrons to come in and get books and return books without having to check anything out. These are stocked every month by the outreach staff. Unlike public libraries that are part of a community or a county or a municipal system, our library system is a regional 501c3 nonprofit. Regional libraries are established in the Virginia Code, Section 42.1 through 37. A regional library system allows 2 or more jurisdictions that join under contract to share the costs and benefits of having libraries to serve their residents. Everybody wins. We currently have 50 staff members in the system. This is 14 full-time and 35 part-time and substitutes. Library staff are employed by Rockbridge Regional Library System, and like other agencies in the area, we use Rockbridge County's plan for our benefits for full-time people. Our board of 12 trustees is appointed by the 4 jurisdictions. Each jurisdiction gets 3 appointees. Each board of supervisors and city council choose these appointees, and we get letters stating that they have been part of our board. Our board is governing rather than advisory, which is to say that administrative and policymaking duties are specified in the Code of Virginia. The governing board has more responsibilities than an advisory board. We are funded with local funds, as you are aware, and local funds from the 4 jurisdictions make up the largest part of our operating budget. The counties of Rockbridge and Bath and the cities of Lexington and Buena Vista each allocate funding for the fiscal year, and the allocations requested are based on the population in the region. So that is to say the breakdown with allocations would be typically 10% from Bath, 17% from Buena Vista, 18% from Lexington, and 55% from Rockbridge. We also receive, I'm so sorry, that smoke is really right here. We also receive allocations in the form of state aid from the Library of Virginia annually. This is typically between $350,000 and $450,000. Local funding, which includes the allocation from our endowment, must be 66% of the total operating budget in order for the library to qualify for state aid. We receive an annual allocation from our endowment run by the foundation. The allocation is based on 3 rolling years of investments and is usually 5% of the endowment. In FY 2023, the total amount was $82,159. About 60% of that, typically 48+ thousand, goes into the operating budget. The remaining amount goes into restricted and designated accounts. We receive money from the federal government in the form of E-rate discount payments because we filter our computers in compliance with SIPA, the Child Internet Protection Act. This ranges from $30,000 to $50,000 annually. It is important to note that all computers at the library are filtered, even those used by staff. The library system also receives unrestricted donations, which can be applied to the operating budget. Donors to the library have the option to designate their gifts as a specific branch or purpose. We receive grants typically from local sources such as the Community Foundation, WNL, arts associations, and United Way. We also apply for state grants like the one for our local history center at the Glasgow Library. We're still waiting to hear back on that. And we also use ARPA, the American Rescue Plan Act. That was used to fund our Fairfield lockers. We also process passports for additional income. It took several years of working with the State Department to make this a reality, but it was worth the wait. We have $24,000 last fiscal year coming from passports. The Rockbridge Regional Library System adds values to the communities we serve. In addition to print books, we offer ebooks and e-audiobooks to download from Libby, a very popular app. I'm sure some of you use that. Our website is a wealth of information and training, including ASVAB preparation, career online high school, kindergarten prep, and homeschooling resources. We provide hotspots for those who don't have internet access at home. We also provide them to visitors to our area. We provide mobile printing from your personal device. Patrons can send their documents 24/7 to the library printers and pick them up when the library is open. There are the library lockers in Fairfield. They're serving that end of our county. They can drop off or pick up their reserve books right there at the lockers. That's near the rescue squad in Fairfield. We provide, sorry. In addition, we serve those patrons who are unable to get to the library. These services include the homebound service that was mentioned earlier, deposit stations, and community stops for patrons who do not live near a library or who lack transportation. Books by mail is another service that we offer for patrons to have books sent to them. These services are critical. You know, we're in a rural area, even though Lexington, the 2.5 square miles of Lexington, everything outside of it is incredibly rural. So those vehicles, that service and outreach is really critical. During FY 2023, we saw an increase in programs over FY 2022, 36%, and in program participants, that went up 17%. Books by mail usage increased by 55%. Some of these services, particularly with books by mail and homebound, kind of depend on someone coming into the service using it, or someone may be passing away. So it's sort of peaks and valleys, but it's still a great service. The number of patrons visits increased by 12%. Ebook checkouts increased by 14%. Additionally, there were increases in the use of our meeting rooms, 20%, and attendees to those meetings. Those meetings are not library programs. They are public meetings used by public groups. There were some decreases in usage, which included computer sessions. While computers are still being used and they are still important, more people are using their personal devices, their phones, their tablets, their laptops. Checkouts of print materials are down 8% as more people are using Libby because it's so convenient. We knew that the print circulation was going to go down. We expected that, but I think COVID-19 really accelerated that. We also provide space for children to be after school for craft groups and book clubs, to name a few. We're also a place for people to cool off in the summer and warm up in the winter. Patrons have no out-of-pocket expense when they come into the library. There's not fines. Really, you want to come in and read a magazine or just warm up, it's all free. Finally, a sneak peek of the FY 2025 budget. The proposed operating budget is much larger for FY 2025. It's important to note that the request is equivalent to a 2% increase every year since FY 2020 for a total increase of 10%. That increase is from what was allocated, there's that word, by the localities in FY 2020. Thank you for listening to me this evening. What questions do you have?
Julie, thank you. Members of the council have questions. Mr. Alligood.
Thank you for the library.
Mr. Alligood, thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the library. It's just a wonderful place, and it should be heavily used all the time there. And listening to what you said earlier, one of the things that you said caught my attention, and I'm just asking as a point of clarification, and that has to do with the filtering. What does filtering do?
You come into the building and use a computer that's not been filtered, particularly for children. We have, through our IT company, they put on filters and we have to kind of fight with them sometimes because they tend to filter more and we have to call them and say, no, this is a safe site. Please unlock that. But for children especially, we lock down a lot.
And so what are we filtering?
We're filtering violent games, porn, anything obscene, which I know is subjective, but all of that is sort of, you don't get to see that as a kid in the library if I'm doing my job right.
All right, thank you. I just didn't know what.
Yeah,
happened.
filtering is super important.
And there's a call, you said in the report here that the filtering is like 50 some thousand. Did I read that
We
correctly?
get discounts from the federal government because we filter our computers. They
It's
don't give us-
economically advantageous for the library to participate in the filtering. The federal government provides them money.
I see,
funding.
I see.
They don't require us to filter adult computers or staff computers, but we filter everything.
Right. And so 30 to $50,000 for, is that the money that you get from the federal government?
Yes,
All right.
that's in the form of discounts. So we pay all of our bills for our internet service and then we get discounts back. from the government.
All right. Thank you. I just didn't know.
You can think of it as a rebate
Yeah,
for
that's
doing
a-
good work.
That's a good way to describe it.
Well, it's a gem for our community. The library, I
Thank you
can't
so
say
much.
enough good about our library. Yeah.
Thank you.
Mr. Betts,
How close would patrons need to be to use their mobile device to print off of the
A good question. Right now, I think that we have mobile printing through Princh. Waynesboro is looking into it. I know Montgomery Floyd has it. So I'm not exactly sure how far away you can be. I think it's because it all goes through the internet to from your location
could you
where you
print
are.
from your house?
Oh, yeah,
Okay.
yeah. That's the idea.
Okay, within pretty wide geographic range.
Yeah, I
Okay.
think you can be in Rockbridge County and if you can get internet access, you can send your
Oh,
prints to the
okay.
library.
Cool. Thank you.
the members of council have questions for Julie. Hearing none, Julie, thank you for being with us. It seems like it wasn't that long ago that you were trying to overcome a flood and construction of different sites and non-library, but building issues. So excited to hear all the good work that you're doing and
Thank you.
that your team's embracing and leaning into the future of technology and making use of it for the betterment for our community. So thank you.
Thank you. We absolutely are. Thank you all.
Take care. Next item on our agenda is public hearing and consideration for the amendment to the zoning ordinance. And call on Arnie to walk us through this.
Good evening to you all. Gonna go through a little bit of your agenda item report. Accessory apartments were approved in the 2017 update to the zoning ordinance. That's the first time where we allowed accessory unit to be, in that case, it had to be within the main building. And per definition, it had to be no more than 25% of the floor area or 750 square feet. And then in the latest edition in 2020 of the comprehensive plan, there's a strategy in the housing section that says, look into detached accessory dwelling units. And that's not an unusual thing. Lots of localities have been doing that for quite some time. I think Richmond most recently, as a larger jurisdiction here in the state. And that particular housing strategy says review regulations allowing accessory dwelling units in separate structures in appropriate residential areas. So the Planning Commission took that up starting in January, where we started going through different elements of an accessory dwelling unit ordinance, things such as how many people should be allowed in, setbacks, heights of the structure. And after we got through that over a number of months, somewhere in the middle of the summer, we had a rough draft that was further refined with public comment. And then ultimately, Planning Commission did just recently hold in October a public hearing, and they make a recommendation for approval unanimously of what you have in front of you this evening. And I'm going to go quickly through that, and please interrupt me if you have questions. In order, because that's the way it's laid out in the zoning ordinance. The first thing we have is the use matrix. So in the use matrix, you see accessory apartment is being struck and it's being replaced by accessory dwelling unit attached. So we're still allowing those accessory dwelling units that are within the main building, or if there's an addition to the main building, then that's the attached part. And nothing changes as far as it being a by right use in the R1, R2, RM, and RLC and C1 zoning district. What is new, as you see it being underlined, is accessory dwelling unit detached. And the recommendation is that they be conditional uses in those 4 zoning districts. So in the R1, R2, RM, and RLC zoning districts. Any questions there?
Was there any reason for the RLC not for it to be by right? Or what was the rationale there?
I'm going to have difficulty because we had so many conversations over such a long period of time. I do not specifically recall. And if anybody else does recall that has been attending all those, please interrupt. I think it was just a consistency to begin with. It's easier to be a little bit more conservative with your regulation out the gate to see how it goes. And then you can make it more permissive as you go forward. It's harder to reel it back in after you've started.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Going over to the lot requirements table, we did not give you the strike through and underline version. I apologize for that. We can certainly do that for you. As an example, in the R1 building height, after the second colon, we added 25 feet for attached accessory dwelling units. So in building height for the R1, R2, RM, and RLC, there's additional language there for detached units. And also in the rear yard for R1 and R2, we added a little bit there for additional regulations in the lot requirements table. The meat of the regulations that are being proposed are 2.5 pages, and they are in the use and design standards. As you're familiar, probably most recently with chickens, if there's a use and there's use and design standards that are developed, they end up in section 11 of the code. And then particularly here, 11.1, because that's where the uses that are residential in nature would be located. Just to quickly go through, you'll see a purpose statement, 2 new definitions. Then there are a set of general standards that apply to both attached and detached accessory dwelling units. And then we further have additional regulations just for attached units, and then a good bit more regulations for detached units. And then there's a little bit for administration at the end.
So I had a question about the occupancy limitations of 2 persons per living unit. In your opinion, would there be any issue with expanding that to say 3 or 4 people? Because and the question behind that is some of these structures seem to be anywhere from 600 feet or 600 square feet to 1,000 square feet. So something on the upper end, 1,000 square feet could probably accommodate more than 2 people in an accessory dwelling unit. So my question would be, what, if any, problem would there be with expanding the occupancy requirements to 3 or 4 instead of 2?
We surveyed a number of different jurisdictions, and a lot of that work, actually, I should credit Alisanne Tumbarge, because she did a major paper or a thesis for her master's program at Tech. So we already had a good bit of data, and I can even tell you for the 9 or so jurisdictions that she surveyed, which ones allowed or limited it to 2 people and which ones had 3 or more. But I think to pass along, there was a good bit of conversation, particularly towards the end when we were sort of calibrating the code after we had the draft together and we were having some input from the public. Where do you fall? Is it 2? Is it 3? A lot of the jurisdictions have something either 2 or 3, and some of them have a little bit more. And the feeling, I think, where we ended up was, for the most part, that 2 would be perhaps a better place to start. And then if we have a number of conditional use permits that come through and we're comfortable, maybe 3 is a better number. And it's easier, as I mentioned a second ago, to expand as opposed to making it more restrictive if we find out that there are issues. I remember discussions about, well, what if a couple lives there and they have a baby? Are you going to kick them out? Well, I hope that we don't get to that situation, but we did come, or the Planning Commission is making a recommendation of 2, primarily, as I just mentioned. It's because you got to start somewhere. This is also an accessory dwelling unit. You already have main building, where a family can be in any number of folks or up to 3 or 4 unrelated people, depending on what zoning district it's in. So please also keep in mind this is accessory to what's already on the property.
I just a follow-up question on that. So if it's conditional and say there was other conditions that weren't met, I'm just trying to figure out if there's a way to, especially in the larger accessory dwelling units, to potentially.
A scale of some sort. If you
Yes.
have over 750 square feet, you're allowed 3 people as opposed to 2.
Something of that nature.
I don't recall anything off the top of my head where as in from another jurisdiction that was along those same lines. But it's something for your consideration if you wanted to do that.
Thank you.
Arnie, have a question, just the one that I've already shared with you. In our existing code, chapter 403, it says that each housekeeping unit under a separate roof shall have an individual water connection and water meter, and it shall be unlawful for any person to extend water service line through his or her meter to another housekeeping unit. And so if is a detached ADU a separate housekeeping unit, which I think it is, has there been any consideration about changing this section of our zoning code to align with the fact that what we're drafting in 420 says that they do not need a separate water meter? Because currently we have a lot of detached ADUs. Well, we have a handful in the city, and this would say that it's unlawful if they are getting water from the main structure, I guess.
And I apologize, before this, I did not know of that section. So that's not a zoning code section. So I'm not as conversant in all the other sections. We will look into whether or not there's a need to change that, or if we abide by that and then have to change something further in the accessory dwelling units. The way right now it's written, that is not a requirement to have to separately meter the detached accessory dwelling unit.
Do you remember what the rationale was to not require a separate water meter, to not require separate electric or gas, just so that there is some level of standard? I mean,
Part of it is just the expense. Depending on how many rules and regulations you put into place, these are going to become more and more expensive. And if you require that separate metering for all those utilities, then you're certainly adding an expense, and you're probably going to miss out on a handful of units. So you have to balance the extra requirements against how many of these do you hope to get to help with our housing crunch.
sure. And again, I'm only asking really with respect to the detached, because if someone's putting in a detached, they might be already biting off a $200,000 structure in the city of Lexington, because construction is in excess of $200 a square foot. So just asking about that. And then a question about requiring them to have their own street address. Any mechanics on getting having your own street address? And that goes back to, again, having your own meters, but I know you want to not require their own meters. But as far as, again, dealing with an electric company, a gas company, and then it's our own water utility, it's ours. But do they allow the same meter to service 2 separate mailing addresses? Is that kosher, if you will, in the eyes of utilities, Dominion and Columbia Gas? Just
I'm going to speculate because I don't know
I don't
for sure, but if you have the main address, and you would think that's where the bill is going to go to. So I wouldn't think that 1 meter for natural gas, and they're going to have one person paying for it. And if that person wants to further sub meter, then that's going to be on them to do. The driver for the separate address is 911, quite simply.
Mhm.
We want the fire department, particularly if it's in a detached unit, for them to know where to go. If they come to the main street up on the front and they actually need to be in the alley to access it, they're losing time. And the same thing to a degree if it's in the main building and the entrances are different. If the attached unit is accessed from the side, it's more for 911 than it is for utility connection.
And again, I completely endorse that. I mean, I agree with that. I'm just tying it back to the meters dealing with these other companies. And then lastly, can you explain a little bit, just so I can wrap my mind around,
how short-term rentals would work. If you have a primary dwelling and let's just say that I have a primary dwelling and I live there, and now I have a detached accessory dwelling unit. If I want to rent the detached accessory dwelling unit, where does that fall? Because that's not my primary dwelling unit, my detached, that's someone else's. So how is that rentable as a short-term rental? Because it's not my primary residence. So I guess that means I can't do type B because it's not my primary residence. And I could do A if I'm actually like sleeping in my detached accessory dwelling unit and renting part of it out. Then it falls into A, right?
Are you doing the whole house? I mean, B includes more than 2 rooms as well as, so I would think it would
B
fall
is
in
owner
B.
or host occupied, right? Type
B is renting out the whole house.
While you're not there.
while you're not there.
Yeah.
So that's where I'm a little bit confused. How could my detached ADU ever be rented as an accessory dwelling unit? I mean, as a short-term rental, because if I'm renting it, I can't be sleeping in my primary residence and calling my ADU my primary residence. So it couldn't ever be rented as a B, like completely a whole house, right?
We didn't change the short-term rentals, and I'm going to explain it this way, and hopefully it'll get to the answer. In that, with the accessory dwelling unit, you get to have 1 per parcel, and with the short-term rentals, you get to have 1 per parcel. The ADUs require the owner to live either in the big house or the little house, if you will. And then if whoever's coming in for a registration, they still have to meet all the short-term rental requirements. So if it's the person that's living in the big house, as the primary, they can be issued a registration because they're a primary resident. If they can prove that they're primary, then they can get a registration. And then also, if you recall, we can also issue registrations to people that are lessees as long as they have a lease at least 1 year in length. So the person that's in the accessory, let's say they have a lease and then they could be leasing that out short term in the same guidelines of the A's and the A type rentals and the B type rentals. Is your question, if I'm the primary and I'm living in the main house, can I just short term rental my accessory without having anybody?
That's
living
exactly
there
my question.
permanently?
Or do I need to have a dummy year lease to my friend who actually never sleeps there, but they sign a year lease just so that under their name, I can now do a type B rental whole house?
But
See
we
what I'm
still
saying?
have to have somebody, whoever is being issued the registration, still has to provide some
That's
proof to
completely
me
my point.
that that they live there.
Completely my point. So that's where I'm only just trying to say, could the detached accessory dwelling unit ever be rented via a short-term rental type B?
Yeah, when we talked about it, we said it was fine as long it's 1 parcel. They are 2 different buildings on 1 parcel. And if that person, the main owner, wants to rent out the ADU as a short-term rental all the time, he still has to abide by the B rules.
Who's the primary resident of the detached dwelling unit that goes for the registration? Who's the primary resident? Not me, who's living in the bigger house, the primary house on that parcel. I can't have 2 primary residences, right?
Right. So I think what you're getting at is if you're the primary in the big house, you cannot just simply short-term rental the
Your little
separate
house.
the ADU without having somebody there as a long-term lessee.
So I do have to have my words, dummy lease with
Well-
someone that goes and gets the permit.
On the contrary, what I would suggest, what I'm hearing you say, Arnie, if you can affirm, if I own a piece of property and I have an accessory dwelling unit, as the owner of the property, I can choose to rent it a long-time lease, or I can short-term rent it. And it falls under all the same categories.
That's not what we.
But this is the intent. If we need a wordsmith, we can certainly get into the weeds on that. But the intent is, as the owner of the accessory dwelling unit and the house, I can choose to short-term rent the ADU. And but what I'm also hearing you say is if as the owner of the house, I lease the ADU to John Smith can then bug out for a weekend and he can lease it. But he's the lessor of the ADU and living there full time.
Correct. And
So you
what
got
I'm understanding is your second example is technically the only way that it could be used as a short-term rental via your year-long leaser.
So basically, it would be like a situation where somebody rented it, whatever, 9 months out of the year, and then that person, the rentor, the other 3 months, short-term rented it essentially like almost like a
Exactly.
sublet.
Like, exactly. Me as the primary resident of the bigger house cannot rent my
Accessory
detached ADU via
short-term rental.
short-term rental. But it can be if I sign someone else to a year-long
Well,
lease.
But that wasn't the intent.
Well, I get that it's not the intent. That's where I'm just trying to,
Because we're going by parcel. These aren't two separate parcels.
just like
I mean,
I'm only-
there is benefits to that,
I'm only pointing out
I understand what
like
you're
the
saying.
unlawful meter, like, I just want to get this right. And if the intent is that my primary resident and we're changing our short-term rental,
Mhm.
that's fine. I just wanted to say that.
Which is the language where in here does it not allow? I'm not sure
I'd have to go back to our short-term rental regulations. Those are the ones that don't align
Conform
with
with
the
this.
intent of this. So we would need to go back and change what we've previously passed as our short-term rental regulations.
Could I ask what your preference is and then we'll make it fit that? In other words, do you prefer that the primary can fully do a short-term rental in the separate unit without having a primary resident in that separate unit? Or would you prefer that there be two people that live there, I'm going to use the word permanently, and one of those has to be the registration?
I think we
issue.
should do the intent because the planning commission spent a lot of time on this, but I just think we should be accurate every bit of our zoning code. And I think we should spell out exactly if it's a type B rental, because when we say that they could have a detached accessory dwelling unit and rent it, do we mean 45 nights or 365 nights?
I think it's
From the RLC, it's 365 nights.
but my perception with looking at the ADU in the residential area for what's proposed here, as the homeowner, as the owner of the property, whether it's a room in my house or the ADU, it's the same. I understand you're delineating and they're different circumstances, but I think the intent, and I'm not sure how it doesn't work out, whether that the additional room is the ADU or the room down the hall doesn't make any difference. I still have to conform to all the requirements of our short-term rental.
If you have an attached ADU and then it
No,
doesn't
no,
matter.
I'm saying,
One parcel, and then we're basing on parcel. Normally your house has one house on a parcel. The only way you can have two is you're either a duplex or you have an ADU. And if you have a duplex, if they're owned by two separate people, they can each do it separately. And in this case, there's only one owner. We only allow one owner on a property with an ADU, and they have to live in one of the two units. And so if they want to use one of the buildings as a short-term rental full-time, they can, but they're still limited to the B rental because the B rental,
So they are limited to the B rental. That's what
Well,
I'm just trying to
if they're
align
renting the
this.
whole house, I mean, if it's attached and they're just doing one room out of their house, that they could do the A rental. But for the most part, they're going to rent out the whole building.
Again, tell me I'm not crazy. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Our short-term rental regulations that are copied in the entire state says that if you want to rent your whole house in a residential neighborhood, it has to be your primary residence.
Mhm.
And you can leave it for so many 45 nights a year and rent your primary residence via short-term rental if you're in a residential neighborhood. Here, we're talking about now having two houses on your property, two separate dwelling units. you're in one primary residential unit and you have another one. Your other one that could be 1,000 square feet, 2-bedroom, 1,000 square feet, can that be rented via the intent 45 nights or 365 nights?
Well, 365 is only for the,
RLC.
yeah,
I
right.
just wanted,
right.
that's where I want to be really clear. But somebody could buy the house next to them, combine the lots and just rent out that house
They could do it in
But-
RLC only.
for 365 nights.
Yeah, and they can do
But
that in RLC right now
That is
anyway.
our short-term rental
Yeah,
policy.
Our short-term rental policy
Our-
says that your primary residence, you can only rent your primary residence.
Well, so maybe,
Type B.
maybe the intent, if I'm understanding, could be that the detached unit is still part of the primary residence.
right. That's how
The,
we.
the ADU is never going to change zoning. So if it's in R1, whether it's a detached facility or a room in the house, it's under the same policies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, where you're getting mixed up is on RLC. We don't require the owner.
In
Correct.
R1, I
Either.
can't
Correct.
short-term rental my home 365
Right,
days a year.
correct.
Exactly.
Okay.
It's totally,
Where is it in conflict? With, if it's a conditional use, I mean, RLC is the only place in commercial that you can do
All right.
365.
I'm really sorry. I guess
No, I appreciate you going
There
through
are-
this because we
there
did
are
this as
two
a planning
houses on a
commission.
one is 3,000 square feet and one is 1,000 square feet.
Correct.
Right? There are two houses. Two houses. Just call it whatever you want. Accessory dwelling.
In
unit
R1,
Sure. Or,
R1.
yes, sir.
Say R1.
Our short-term rental regulations say you can only rent your primary resident for 45 nights a year, type B, right? So if you have a house, 3,000 square feet and an a second house at this 1,000, your primary residence has to be the 3,000 square foot house, or it could, it is for the sake of this conversation. So if I want to do a short-term rental type B, can I do it in the second house on my property?
Mhm.
And I think that the intent was that you can, but what I'm saying is then we need to adjust our regulations because currently our regulations say you can only do that in the 3,000 square foot house that is your primary residence. Because by definition, you can't have two primary residences because we define the primary residence as
Could-
where you sleep 187 or more nights a year.
Right.
And you can't do that in your main house and your accessory dwelling unit.
But
Well,
could the
but-
accessory dwelling unit be viewed as part of the primary residence?
Yes.
Like it's like when you.
Not
rent
if
out a
you
room-
got a
That's on one lot.
CUP,
rent out a-
not if you got a CUP to call it an accessory dwelling unit.
You can't sell it separately. That's one of the requirements.
Same
It is
property.
basically considered, it is one property. And that's why when we got to the short-term rentals, I don't think it needs that distinction because it is one property. It and kind of on a
With
separate,
its own address, with
Yeah.
its own entrance.
So,
You see what I'm saying,
so let me ask a clarifying question. This might help. How are like duplexes treated? Like, let's say somebody lived in a duplex, they lived in the bottom unit and they rented out the top unit, or vice versa. How would that be treated? Would the other unit within the duplex be treated as part of their primary residence, or would it be treated as or would it be treated differently?
Two separate units in that case.
with two different owners.
Yeah.
What if, I mean, if somebody owned the whole thing and lived in one of them and rented the other part out, I think that's potentially analogous.
I'd love to, Jeremy, I know you're listening intently and I'm glad that you're with us virtually. Can you weigh in or provide some clarity on how we might resolve the wording? And do you see it from a legal perspective? Do you see it the conflict that David's talking about? Is there a remedy or there language in our code that would cover it already, or do we need to be a little bit more mindful? And thank David for bringing this forward and helping us to get it right.
Well, it's obviously you want to make sure you get it right. I would have to take a look at the short-term rental regulations. I don't have them in front of me. I do wonder, to Nick's point, maybe there's an avenue of treating the ADU for the purposes of the short-term rental ordinance treating the ADU as part of the primary residence. And maybe you could just add that language into the short-term rental, say for the purposes of short-term rental, detached AD units will be considered part of the primary residence. Again, I want to think it out and look at it on paper, but that might accomplish the objective of bringing it in and considering it part of the primary residence, and then treating it like it's a room in the house, like I think you were describing, Frank.
Very good. Thank you for thinking through the minutia. It certainly falls squarely into that unintended consequence, because I didn't see it, the conflict or the issue as you raised it. So thank you. Mr. Smith.
So as a result, the bedroom definition in the ADU would count towards the total number of bedrooms in the. And what I'm getting at is, I want to along those lines be certain that the primary resident wouldn't be able to rent out both properties as type B.
Separately.
We specifically say that in the rule that you can only have one registration, short-term registry. Sorry, Arnie, that's your question.
No, but that's true. And we want to clarify that. in the
Benefit
next-
of the press that's
Yeah.
here.
In the next zoning text amendment, we want to clarify that. It's already, I think, in there, but I think we want to actually really spell it out that you can only have one booking per, can't divide it up and have two bookings.
So it's
Even if
one
it's a
booking
separate
per
building.
parcel.
Yeah, it says that.
Okay, all right.
Could I just, to make sure that I understand, per the planning commission's recommendation, and you are accepting of it, and we got to make sure that it actually works in the code, that you're okay with there being a primary resident in the main house that can do type B rentals in the accessory for those limited number of 45 nights in those zoning districts where that is allowed, which is R1, R2, and RM.
I'm
That's-
fine with that. That was the intent. I followed along on the conversation completely, because the reason I understand why we're doing this, and that's the intent. I just spent too much time in 2017 and 2019 on short-term rental regulations to ignore the fact that the host has to be able to prove that the unit, the housing unit they are renting via short-term is their primary residence.
Could you
And-
just,
and That's
Right.
where I'm having.
just elaborate real quick on type B?
Oh, sorry. Type A is where you are renting out up to 2 rooms at a time while you're there.
Okay.
You're in residence during that period of time, and that can happen up to 104 nights in a year. A subset of that, you can actually leave for up to 45 nights and rent out however many bedrooms you have.
Okay,
That's type B.
thanks.
So hearing those, I know you still have to take public comment, but if we could just suggest, if you wanted to consider postponing this to the next meeting, we can work out the language in the 2 areas that we have to go back and make sure that we are consistent. And we can certainly do that by the next meeting, I presume.
Can I ask one more clarification question? It was about, there's one for the attached and one for the detached on page 6. No attached accessory dwelling unit with the entrance above, so it's D2. I'm just trying to understand exactly what's the reasoning for that.
We don't want a set of ugly stairs going up to on the front side of the house. So the front side, you can't have a set of exterior stairs going up to a second unit.
So
So at least put it on the side
have to be
or on
like
the
an
back.
alleyway or something. Okay. Or in the back.
That's just an aesthetic
Okay.
issue.
So I caused a headache, and I'm sorry, on the water meter, just to align our code, every section of it, and then just to clarify the intent of planning commission on the short-term rental. Nick had a really good point about the number of people. You know, a 1,000 square feet unit is a good size. And I know that, again, the intent, well, maybe not the intent, if a family comes to Lexington for a period of time, and while they're here, they start a family, do they have to, if they're, let's say they're only here for 3 years while someone's a student, and they start a family while they're here, and the family expands from 2 to 3 during their second year in Lexington, do they have to find a new place to live for their 3rd year? I'm not comfortable with that. And so I think Nick made a really good point on that.
If that is a sticking point, there is a potential solution where you define the number of people. So you could say no more than 2 people can reside in the attached or the detached that are above 3 years in age. So that allows you to have that child and still stay here for a year or 2 before they get to that 3rd year, so that you wouldn't be kicked out just for having a child.
I mean, to be honest with you personally, I'd like to see it be like 18 years of age, like where just, a child was,
Do you want to save that for discussion? Because
Oh,
otherwise I'm going to chime in, but I think it's probably more appropriate for
Yeah,
discussion.
I would hate to say to a single parent with 2 kids, sorry, I'm not going to rent to you because the city of Lexington doesn't allow me to. And it's 1,000 square foot unit, which is, again, all those Pikes Place apartments behind Walmart are just over 1,000 square feet. And they are 2-bedroom, 2.5 bath, full kitchen, living room, lots of closets. That's very large, 1,000 square feet. And a family could certainly live there.
Those kinds of issues fall into the Fair Housing Act. So we should probably look at the regulation on fair housing before we put something in place permanently.
the only other thing for me to add is the definitions. We added a few definitions, modified a couple, and that's all I have for presentation.
Can certainly understand why Planning Commission spent so much time vetting this and working through it, because there are lots of moving parts. And if I remember correctly, the actual intent of this was to provide housing stock. We're smart enough and planning was wise enough to look at it that some people may want to use it if they do an ADU, may become a short-term rental circumstance. So we need to make sure that fits the box, but there's no way for us to legislate exactly what we want people. Could be someone who lives in the big house who loses a spouse and is living there, and then family with traditional couple with 3 children come to stay in the 1,000 square foot to take care of grandma. We can't legislate for every possible scenario, and that's why the conditional use permit, I think, is very positive and works well to make sure the intent and give council the opportunity to keep our neighborhoods in good order while we add to the housing stock. So thank you, Arnie, and thank you, Planning Commission. With that behind us, I'd like to open the public hearing and invite anyone who would like to speak to this matter to please come forward. Is there anyone here who would like to speak on this public hearing regarding accessory dwelling units in our residential zoning district? Hearing and seeing no one, close the public hearing at 7:51 and ask for council's consideration and discussion.
I will respond to the number of people. Like Arnie said, Planning Commission was fine with 2 or 3 people. There were a couple items that came up. One was Planning Commission did not want to define family, so that you couldn't, because what people were okay with a family living there. The problem we have in Lexington is you get unrelated people, college students in the past. And so our current regulations for R1 and R2 is we only allow up to 3 unrelated people in a household. And so that's where we ended up with using just 2, is so that we don't violate that 3 unrelated people per household. And in this case, it would really be per parcel instead of a household necessarily. And just so you don't get the density too high. I don't think Planning Commission would have any problem if we changed it to 3, or I think Artie even suggested 2 and we tried to come up with language saying 2 and a child, but then again, we felt like we're splitting here. So just a little bit of background on why
That I understand.
we're at that number of people.
And like, hopefully we can work to get it, in a good, to have some discussion. I do think Marilyn made a good point about reviewing the Fair Housing Act and seeing if there's anything that comes up within that. that might.
That even may define family and a lot of other definitions that relate to this.
Yeah. A couple other things that I haven't heard any comment. We didn't through out couple public hearings we've now had. We substantially changed the attached accessory dwelling unit to allow it has to be less than 50%. It was 25% before, and now it's just below that. So you almost have a 50-50 split. So I don't know if that's any concern to council or not. We ended up upping the size of the detached accessory dwelling unit. We originally were looking at between 600 to 800 square feet and had public comments suggesting 1,000. And once we got to it, it's like, well, if your lot's big enough and we have all these other protections in place, particularly the setbacks, we felt comfortable going up to 1,000. So just a couple other things to keep in mind if there's any comments on those. Unfortunately, this is one of those things I think we all, as a community, we need to try it, and we will probably have to come back and tweak it based on some comments, but we can do that.
Yeah. Certainly don't let perfection get in the way of progress, and start having ADUs and see how we can work them. Very good. Any further discussion? Well, would ask for council's consideration if our planning liaison would like to make a motion.
Yeah, can we, I'm not sure if tabling it is the appropriate term till Arnie and Jeremy have a chance to look at it to address the issues that were brought up?
Sure, we can do that.
Because I feel like everyone's
carry it forward.
comfortable with the short-term rental, making sure that meshes.
Yeah, let's just plan to take it up at the next meeting. Arnie?
I just make a recommendation that you table it to a date certain, therefore the ad doesn't
Ah.
have to go out again. And then if we're not ready for then you just table it to the next one following that.
Yes. I move that we table.
Well,
Oh.
with the approval of our attorney, we'll just continue this item to our next meeting.
Great.
Unless there's an objection.
I don't have an objection. I just want to say generally good work, and I think this is moving in the right direction. And glad we're gonna take another, meeting and get it right. Yep.
Very good. Take the time and get it right. No question. Very good. Next item are consideration of minutes. They were included in your packet. Unless there's an objection or any modifications, we'll approve those as presented. Next is citizen remarks and comments. And I don't know that anybody signed up. Is there anyone here who would like to speak to council this evening on any topics? Arthur, come on up.
I did intend to say that I appreciate you looking at this accessory dwelling unit. That selfishly, that's something that I've been interested in. So I appreciate all the work you've done on it. Thank you.
Thank you, Arthur. Yeah, Planning Commission has worked long and hard and had lots of conversations about that. So thank you. Anyone else who would like to speak to council this evening? Seeing none, we'll go to the consent agenda. There are 2 items for your consideration and
Make a motion that we approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
have a motion and a second, a roll call vote. Mr. Betts.
Aye.
Mr. Ziegler.
Aye.
Ms. Strawn.
Aye.
Mr. Smith.
Aye.
Mr. Alligood.
Aye.
Ms. Alexander.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. Mark your calendars for fun stuff in Lexington. Unfinished business. Update on 201 North Randolph Street.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We've been in touch with the contractor there who's doing that demolition. That's Chris Leslie. And this week their primary piece of equipment, their track hauler or whatever that it tears things down is in the shop. So they weren't able to get any work done on it this week. They're hoping to get the parts to repair it. So excavator is what I was talking about. Their big excavator. So that's where we stand, unfortunately.
Did they give a time frame or anything on?
Waiting for parts, just like everybody else waits for parts. So they didn't have them this week yet.
Very good. Thank you, sir. Any other questions? Hearing none, boards and commissions, Blue Ridge Resource Authority, Mr. Smith.
Quickly, as you might suspect, our leachate expenses are down quite a bit from last year and the previous year, which is good. It's bad because you see what's going on around us. Secondly, we're beginning to get our aerial survey yearly to be completed, which helps analyze, make sure we're in compliance with one DEQ and our slope applications, and also to help determine our compaction rates. Higher compaction rates are better than lower compaction rates. Higher compaction rates extend the life of our landfill. So that should be completed probably by the end of the year. Primarily focused on cell one. And as you may remember, cell one has not been covered to allow for additional material to be applied once we find areas that have settled, and will provide more space for solid waste. That's it. Any questions?
Thank you, Chuck. One of the things that pile on is that there's some concern, as you may recall, the closure funds, the schedule had that we would average, I think, 3% interest on our assets for the to build up the funds. And obviously, for quite some time, we were running well below 3%, while interest rates were at 0.0 nothing. With work that Chuck has done as treasurer of the Blue Ridge Resource Authority and getting funds in the local government pool, receiving in excess of 5%. And I think we are back on track at this point. Dan reported to for the post-closure funds moving in the right direction. So positive news and good work. So thank you for getting that done, Chuck.
Well,
Main Street, Lexington, Mr. Smith.
give me a sec. Candlelight procession Friday after Thanksgiving. We step off at 5:30. Conclude at Hopkins Green for the for the Christmas tree lighting. Small Business Saturday. Next, the following day with the Grinch in attendance from 1 to 3. Christmas parade on Friday, December 1st, starting at 6 o'clock, and the Jingle Bell Run on the following day, starting at 10. Registrations for the parade and the run both increase in price this Saturday. I will add that entrance fees for the parade are an awesome bargain at $20 for regular entrance and $10 for nonprofits, and those will be going up this Saturday. Late night shopping till 7 o'clock citywide with Dickens Carolers on Friday, December 8th. And holiday church open house the following Friday, December 15th from 4 to 6. And Janie, I will send all this to you.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. No shortage of fun things to do for the holiday season. Any questions for Mr. Smith? Planning Commission, Ms. Strong.
Planning Commission met on Thursday, November 9th, and we unanimously approved an application by Max Mark Homes and Weatherburn Holdings, LLC, to amend the planned unit development for the Weatherburn subdivision contingent upon the applicant complying with all requirements of the site plan, including making Chamberlain Loop one-way. And this will come to council in December, and hopefully prior to that, Chamberlain Loop will be made one-way, and so we don't have to keep that contingency. We also reviewed the land use chapter of the comprehensive plan to assess the city's progress and develop goals and projects for the coming year. And we will not meet next Thursday since it's Thanksgiving. And that's all I have.
Very good. Thank you for all the good work you and the Planning Commission do in support of our city. Regional Tourism, Mr. Betts.
Yes, sir. Tourism Board serving Lexington, Buena Vista, and Rockbridge is pleased to announce the appointment of Cheryl Wagner as the region's new tourism director. She'll begin her employment on Monday, December 11th, 2023. Cheryl, a native of Rockbridge, brings over 27 years of tourism experience, with the last 16 spent as director of tourism for the city of Stanton, where she successfully led tourism operations and generated positive economic growth. Her early beginnings in the industry began with significant contributions to the City of Lexington Tourism Department, where she advanced from Visitor Center Manager to Director of Marketing. In addition to her extensive experience, Cheryl earned a Bachelor of Arts in Business and Economics from Randolph-Macon College and a Master in Tourism Administration from the George Washington University.
Terrific. Thank you. Congratulations, and glad Cheryl's coming home. Any questions from council? Very good. Look forward to her start here in the next couple weeks. Very exciting. Raro, Mr. Ziegler.
No report.
Threshold, Ms. Alexander.
No report.
Maury Service Authority, Mr. Alligood.
No report, except
Jeez.
All I heard was no report. Thank you very much.
just wanted to remind all of us and all the people present that the meeting that's scheduled for December 5th is still on to inform the localities about the engineering reports and the cost estimates for the wastewater treatment plant projects to modernize. There will be no MSA board meeting this month. There will be a joint board meeting on the 12th of December
What
in this room
what time?
for December and November. And that's the end of the report. So
Yes, sir. Well, what time is the December 5th MSA meeting?
5 o'clock.
5 p.m.
5.
Is it here?
It's the last time we had it was at the Horse Center in the large meeting room at the Horse Center.
Is that where it's
And that's where it's set to be now,
5? Okay.
subject to change, of course.
Okay.
But right now that's where it's scheduled.
And that'll be a regional, intend to be a regional meeting.
That'll be a regional meeting with the city council, the Rockbridge Board of Supervisors in attendance to hear about the project and hear about the cost.
Very good. It I don't know if any conversation or thing has grown out of discussions at the MSA, but Buena Vista's staring down a lot of the same issues. It may be worthwhile to invite them to join to hear.
They're invited as well.
Okay, very good. Very good. Thank you, sir. For my report, just a couple of items. Attended the Focus Fitness ribbon cutting. They have a location here in Lexington and opened up Focus Fitness 2 in Buena Vista. And local folks who have a budding business for people to work out privately in a private gym. It's an interesting concept. You go online, select your time, and go. The gym is all yours. You don't have to work out with anyone else. And it's open 24 hours a day. So you can choose the time that's convenient for you. So no more excuses for not working out. Wanted to, as I was driving earlier today down Washington Street, I was recalling the bumpy, treacherous trail that was Washington Street some time ago. And this council, I think, wisely spent some extra dollars for Randolph and Washington, both to get some new curb and gutter and the asphalt that's been laid. And both streets are serving our communities and our neighbors really well. So wanted to pause and thank Jim for bringing that to us, as well as Public Works for the work they did in getting that a job well done. A lot of times we just focus on the problem or the nuisance and don't celebrate the successes. So thank you to Jim and Public Works for that accomplishment. And on the horizon, I've asked the city manager, we're going to look at some dates in likely the new year to have work sessions to talk about possibility of a dog park on city land that is cannot be developed. That may, but just have some discussions about the use of the land between McCorkle and Route 11 bypass. And then also in the new year, I hope that we will be able to have either a work session or a presentation dealing with the delinquent tax properties and getting some traction and helping out the neighbors who have complained in the past about houses that are unoccupied, falling down, and no taxes being paid. So give that as fun on the horizon in the new year. And with that, I'll turn it over to the city manager, unless there are any questions. City manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. All of us have seen the paving work, I believe, on South Main Street and Link Road. We're using federal dollars for that have been passed through by VDOT, and we have a contract that we're administering with a paving company, and we'd hoped that contract would allow us to do our local paving as well. Unfortunately, we found out that the federal government does not permit that, so we've had to put in place a separate contract. Delayed us probably a week, and I'm guessing at this point in time, it might be a little difficult to get paving in this year yet. We'll see what the weather brings. And if we don't get it this year before winter time, so to speak, we'll be seeing it in the spring instead. We have a local fiber company, internet company, that's going to be overbuilding their fiber system here in the community, and that's Brightspeed. So they'll be putting fiber up on their existing copper wires throughout the city, and also in some of their duct work that they have under the road. They won't be putting up anything new potentially. We believe they've got the entire city covered right now, but in any case, that will be faster fiber than we currently have throughout the city. And we're working right now, the city attorney and city staff, to be sure that they will be have a permit that's required for working in the right of way, and also that they have the franchise agreement in place that allows them to just do that work. We don't foresee any problems or issues with that. We just received a grant from the Virginia Department of Emergency Management for $101,741 so that we could train and equip an emergency response team. These dollars came from the federal government, Homeland Security, and it'll allow us just to have capacity so that if we do have a verified active threat, we are better equipped to handle that threat here at home in Lexington and across our region. A few updates from the police department. The department will hold a public meeting on December 6th at the community room at the school board offices, and that's primarily so that individuals who live in Diamond Hill and Green Hill area can come and make comments about parking. We've had some areas of that neighborhood where parking is becoming a problem on street. People from outside the area are parking on the street for extended periods of time. So we want to listen to those folks and see if we can come up with some solutions, have a conversation, and again, just see if we can resolve some of the difficulties people are facing there. I believe it'd be a very positive and productive time to spend with our community members. Our newly certified officer, Stephen Stewart, was sworn in this past week, and the police department provided the color guard for our Veterans Day celebration in the community. Fire department updates. The department hosted a train the trainer class for 19 area firefighters who will be certified to teach firefighter 1 and 2. And they also held a basic pump operators course for our area. I mention these things from time to time because it is important that our fire department, working with our area, continue to train our volunteers and our professional paid staff so that we have better capacity across the area. So I always want to bring these things up because it's important. We're working together. We're increasing the resources we have available to the community to provide these very important services to our community. The tower truck was used to present the American flag at the Maury River Middle School Color Run. The department assisted Rockbridge County with structure fires on Alum Springs Road and Big Springs Drive, as well as a small brush fire on Bell Road. The department also assisted in suppressing a small woods fire in Buena Vista caused by a lawnmower catching fire. And we were very fortunate in that incident that we don't have a similar fire to what we're seeing in Bedford County, as that lawnmower, when it burned, caught on fire the leaves that surrounded it. And with the right conditions, we could have had another large fire over there. Fortunately, we avoided that. Staff attended state EMS training for do not resuscitate and training for the use of hydraulic rescue tools. And these hydraulic tools allow the department to use life-saving tools and rescue tools some distance from the truck. We used to have to tether those tools to the truck in order to get power, pneumatic power, I should say hydraulic as a matter of fact. And now we can do that and remove those tools and take them some distance from the truck, allowing more flexibility, of course, and ability to provide rescue capabilities in locations where we couldn't provide them in the past. And I have a short report, so I'm done unless there's questions.
I'm gonna make
Okay.
one comment just because I'm on the Round Rana, the Rockbridge Area Network Authority. The fiber that Brightspeed is putting in, it is not any faster than what Rana has or our ISPs, Spark, Glow Fiber or VTS. It is faster than Comcast because that is not true fiber. Just a correction, I think, to what you said.
Clarification.
Yeah.
And regarding the Brightspeed, is that all to be hung? There's no asphalt that's to be disturbed.
At this point in time, we're not aware of any asphalt that they're disturbing. If they have a franchise and they're allowed to use that franchise to cut the asphalt and put pavement under the road, then that could be the case. Right now, they're talking about duct work that's already existing
Mhm.
and hanging it only on the copper wire that they have in place.
I would hate for there to be the irony of tearing up Washington and Randolph after we just celebrated how smooth and lovely those are. So
And that brings up another question though. So take Jefferson Street, for example, that Columbia Gas is torn up. What is our requirement to them when they're through? I know they're not through yet, but how smooth do they have to get that payment? Because even the patches now are terrible, even though I know they're not through.
You recall we had that same question, I believe, out on East Nelson Street by Kroger's, and it was very difficult there. And we'll be expecting the same type of outcome where they'll do a full lane paving. And I think that turned out to be real smooth and Travis
It's not that-
serviceable unless you disagree.
it's to our satisfaction, is my understanding. All parties need to be reasonable, but yeah, as much as they've torn up, my understanding is they anticipate repaving.
Thank you. That should be done.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Again, full lane width. It'll be a 10 or 11 foot wide lane, all new pavement. Again, like in front of Kroger's, if you recall, a couple of years back, we had trenching and we had disruptions and it was a mess for months.
Other questions? I'm going to bounce back for just a half second. Some members of council were able to attend the Veterans Day celebration at Lexington Presbyterian Church. And a pleasant surprise was the Lexington Police Department Color Guard, which I wasn't aware that we had one, but they did a great job and wanted to recognize the contributions they made for honoring our veterans last Saturday, which was terrific. City Attorney, Jeremy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I too participated in the meeting with Jim and Patrick and Brightspeed. There was discussion about their franchise. They had have a belief that they acquired a franchise from CenturyLink in their asset purchase from CenturyLink. I've asked them to produce that so we can take a look at it and cautioned them that franchises only last 40 years. So if CenturyLink's or CenturyLink's predecessor, and I think they said they got it from Central Telephone, they could be to the point where they need to get a new franchise. So that may be something that is forthcoming. I do believe, to your question, Mr. Mayor, they spoke about burying in some areas. And like Mr. Howell said, that'll be a function of the franchise, either the one that exists, if it does exist, or a future one, where we can impose some conditions to address paving and making sure that it's paved to our satisfaction as we go through that franchise process. Just something to bear in mind as this all unfolds. Other than working with city staff on the Brightspeed issue, I've been working on some contracts of late. My office has reviewed a mass appraisal software contract for the Commissioner of Revenue. We hope to get that wrapped up in the next week or so. I've worked on a bailment agreement. The police department is acquiring or using a horse for its mounted patrol, and we worked on a bailment agreement with somebody who's voluntarily providing that horse for the police department's use. Also reviewed a contract for the police department concerning software. It hasn't been functioning as desired. Software for identifying, it's a camera system for identifying parking violators. So that's something that the chief and I are working through and seeing if there are any remedies or recourses for the city with regard to that contract. Obviously, Mr. Mayor, I worked with you a little bit on some contract language over the last couple of weeks. And I've worked on a couple of things we've talked about in closed session as well. Upcoming, Arnie sent me a copy of some proposed edits to the subdivision ordinance, so I'll be looking at that. Jim and I have talked about an A&E contract that needs some work, so I'll be looking at that coming up. And obviously, it looks like short-term rental and ADU is something that I'll be looking at in the next couple of weeks as well. So just keeping y'all up to date on what's going on, but happy to answer any questions.
Perfect. Thank you, Jeremy. Yeah, lots of things going on, and we're grateful for your meticulous eye. Members of council have any questions for the city attorney? Very good. Thank you, sir. Next item is new business. Jim.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Two things on the agenda, and as the mayor said earlier, therefore, just really review and information at this point in time instead of consideration. First item is the Valley Alcohol Safety Awareness Program, and there, as you see in front of you, is a resolution that would dissolve that local agency. It would not eliminate the services that are provided to the community, but we have, if you will, a break in staffing right now, both at the director's level and at other staff in that agency. Hard to find people with that experience. It makes little sense to try and recreate the local agency. The board has recommended the agency be dissolved. The attorney, that was also a member of the firm that our city attorney works with, has put this resolution together, wants to do a little bit of a housekeeping on it to add a few more little language more specific to the particular circumstances, and then it would come back before you for review, consideration, approval, etc. But this really doesn't, again, change service levels. It just allows the state to pick up these services through their state employees or contracted entities that they typically deliver services to the community with. If there's any questions, that's really where we stand. And I believe, again, city attorney could probably also chime in if there's other questions.
Essentially, we're wrapping up the local organization. We will, when you wind up any business, you'll have to divvy up the assets and liabilities, and that's the process that's going to unfold over the next couple of months. The thinking now is we'll dissolve it effective December 31, but that's still a little bit up in the air, and that's why it really transitioned into more of an informational matter than an action matter tonight. But we'll have the resolution. I've already marked on it. It'll be ready for one of the next two meetings, almost certainly. So, and it will be managed by the state for the foreseeable future. Long range plan. Maybe it does revert to another local organization eventually, but it'll be state operated for a while.
Thank you, sir. 15.2.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The next item here, I think we're all somewhat aware of, is that the Main Street Lexington organization, who we all love and know very well, is trying to do some work in the old courthouse square to just bring that up to date a little bit and polish it. Great resource for our community. As part of that, they'd like to be able to look comprehensively at everything in the area, including the Veterans Memorial. They sent a joint letter, or sent a letter jointly to the county and the city, asking perhaps an exchange where the county would give up, if you will, the Veterans Memorial. The city would take it over, basically for maintenance and simplicity of managing that area. I put together this resolution for the city council to consider, so that if the county decided, the board of supervisors decided that they wanted to part with it, we'd be willing to accept it. It's been suggested by the mayor that we let this sit for a while to wait and see what the county actually does, but if they're interested, we've got this in our pocket, so to speak.
Prepared to respond if they want to make a transfer. Thank you, sir. Any questions for city manager? Ms. Alexander?
Yes, I have comments about 15.1 regarding VASAP. If the state's going to take this over for the locality, will we be able to negotiate some assurances that they will be available to the citizenry just as much or more as the local service was? And if they have VASAP classes, will they have those classes here, or will people have to find a way to get out of town to those classes?
I would have to check that. I really don't know that we can negotiate anything with them or what their program currently looks like as far as classes, etc. I'll just have to ask those questions. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm optimistic that some of it is moved after COVID and digital. The in-person isn't as critical and can be done virtually.
I'm hoping.
But yes,
but I don't know if that's
it doesn't serve our community well if we close it down.
right. And if people don't have a license at that time,
right,
how are they going to get out of town to take the class so that they can get a license back?
I'll have to check.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions for the city manager? For the benefit of those that may have arrived a little bit late, we do have a closed session added to our agenda, and it is to discuss individual applicants for our city manager search. And we've added, I don't anticipate there'll be any action taken after our meeting, but there, depending upon the discussion we have in closed session, we may discuss the process because we're not able to talk about process for the city manager search in the closed session. When we come out, we may discuss that and how we'll proceed with our city manager search. So, well, before Ms. Alexander reads us into a closed session, I want to thank everyone for being here. And as it is that time of year of Thanksgiving, I hope everyone has a very good Thanksgiving. We have lots to be thankful for and grateful for our staff and our fantastic city and all the hard work that it takes to keep things moving in a good direction. So thank you all and happy Thanksgiving. Ms. Alexander.
I move that Lexington City Council convene in closed meeting pursuant to Virginia Code 2.2-3711A1 for the purpose of discussing and considering candidates for the position of city manager.
Second.
Thank you, David. I have a second. Roll call vote. Ms. Strawn.
Aye.
Mr. Smith.
Aye.
Mr. Sigler.
Aye.
Mr. Betts.
Aye.
Mr. Alligood.
Aye.
Mayor Friedman.
Aye.
And I vote aye.
What he was referring
We're
to.
now going into closed session. Thank you.
403-24.
No.
Oh.
We're there.